Okay, so good afternoon. I am Dr. Diogo Pinheiro. I am the Assistant Director for CURCA. This is our, very important MVP person in the office, Allison Grundel. She's the person who's going to be taking care of all the fine details of travel grants. And so today we're going to go over the process of applying for these travel grants, so to make sure that you submit applications that are complete, that are thorough, that are competitive, so that you can get these travel grants, right? And so I'm going to be sharing my screen here so that we can go through this travel grant application. If at any point you have questions, make a note of them and we can go through your questions at the end of the presentation. So today's workshop is about the fall cycle for our student travel grant program. What do we mean by the fall cycle? Any travel that's going to happen between now and January 31st falls under this cycle of funding. And so we're going to talk about the steps that you're going to take to apply for the program, what you should be aware of, the things that we want to see in an application so that you can do as thorough a job as possible. So first of all, if you want to have more detailed information about the process, about the link to where to apply, etc., you can go to the CURCA website, right? And on the CURCA website, there's going to be that little tab there that says for students, and under the CURCA programs, you can see there that there's this link to fall spring travel grants. So website, very simple, right? ung.edu/CURCA. So for students, fall spring travel grants. Once you click on that, you will come to this webpage that will have the deadline, September 16, by midnight. It's going to have certain resources. For example, it will have the request for proposals and the rubric, right? The rubric is going to be how you're going to be evaluating your submissions. And most importantly, it's going to have the link to what we would call our info ready page, right? So that blue button at the bottom of the screen is where you would click to pull up the application page for our travel grants, right? So even if you're not writing something yet, if you haven't written anything yet, if you don't have anything ready, I strongly recommend that you look at first the request for proposals and the rubric that are linked there on the right-hand side in the resources side of the page, and then you click on the apply for button there so that you can see how the info ready page looks like. And so once you click on the info ready page, you're going to see different things that you can apply for, but there will be the student travel grants right there in the middle. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to go through some of the items that are required for submission, right? One of the key things that you're going to have to submit on your application is a cover letter. This cover letter should be 2 pages maximum, right? In other words, don't write a 15-page submission, right? We want it to be 2 pages. Brevity is also important. 2 pages exclusive of budget, right? So it's 2 pages of text. The budget comes later, right? And on that cover letter, we want to see a few things that are going to be important for us to determine which applications are going to get funded or not. First, you're going to describe the conference, right? And you're going to tell us whether the conference is regional, national, undergraduate. Excuse me. Are you presenting on the undergraduate section of a professional association? Is it an undergraduate conference? All of that is important. And so you're going to describe that in your cover letter. You're going to describe your specific role in the research that you're going to be presenting, or in the project that you're going to be presenting, right? Because it doesn't have to be just traditional research projects. It can be other forms of creative activity. And so Was it you who primarily did the research? Were you a research assistant on a faculty's bigger project? Is this something that you did on your own or with a group of other students? And if so, what was your role there, right? Were you the first author? Were you the last author? Were you the primary collaborator? You're going to explain whether this is for a poster or an oral presentation. You're going to explain what role your mentor played, right? Was it the fact that they did 90% of the research and you helped here and there? Or did they just provide feedback on a project that you led from beginning? And then a couple of things that are going to be very important here. One is going to be, you should give it some thought and write a kind of detailed description of how this conference fits in to your bigger career goals, right? Oh, this is going to help me get into graduate school. This is going to help me get into this program, get this job, you know, get this, excuse me, scholarship. So that is an important component of the cover letter, right? And then where you can go a little bit beyond these 2 pages, right, is where you're going to enter your budget. And for the budget, we want to see a description of what you are going to be spending money on: airline tickets, lodging, per diem for food, something like that. And to be thorough, we also want to see evidence of these items on the budget. Now, this evidence doesn't mean that, oh, you have to have already booked your hotel. That's not what we mean by evidence, right? Oh, you have to have already bought your, that's not what we want to see by evidence. What we want to see by evidence is just some evidence that you've done the basic research as to the costs of what you're trying to do, right? Meaning that you pulled up the hotel webpage and you looked at how much it would cost to stay 2 nights at the hotel that you want to stay in, right? Because one of the things that we want to see is that it's feasible for you to complete this travel with the money that we can give you, right? And so what we don't want to have is for you to say, oh, I'm going to spend $50 a night on lodging, and then come travel time, you realize that the cheapest hotel is $300 and therefore you can't go, right? So by evidence, we just want to see, you know, maybe a screenshot, maybe some more detailed information about the costs that you want to cover with this travel grant, right? And if you have more questions about how to write the cover letter, I strongly recommend that you take a look at the rubric that we have attached both in the Info Ready page and on our website, so that you can see exactly how we're going to be judging these proposals. Now, sometimes students will be working with a larger group of students on their projects, right? Maybe they collaborated with each other. Maybe they are part of a lab. Maybe they are part of an ensemble, if we're talking about like a music performance of some sort. But if there are more than one student involved in the project, each student has to apply individually, because these grants are tied to the individual, not to the project, right? And so there will be certain things that you can sort of work on together, right? You can submit the same abstract or a similar budget, but everything else is supposed to be individual, and the cover letter must be your own individual work. You can't be like, oh, we'll just all submit the same cover letter, right? The cover letter has to be individual. And so you have to make sure that your role in that collaboration with this other student is highlighted, and you should have a good idea of who was the primary author, and if there's no primary author, why is it important for both authors to be there at the conference, and so on and so forth, right? There is no guarantees that everybody in the same project will be funded, and so it's important for us to understand why it would be important for a particular project, for example, to be able to take all 3 students on a conference. Besides this cover letter that will include that budget, and the budget can go over the 2 pages, but the cover letter should stay at 2 pages. There's a couple of other things that you have to submit. One is the abstract that you submitted to the conference or event or whatever it is that you're trying to travel to, right? And if it's not a traditional abstract, right? If it's not a traditional bit of research, right? Maybe you're trying to travel to a poetry event where you're going to read a poem and that you worked on. If you don't have an abstract like that in a traditional sense, you can submit a letter about the submission process to that event, where you describe how you were able to, or how you're going to get accepted into that event, right? And if it's like, you know, a musical event, right, and you had to submit an audition tape, you submit that to us. The next thing that we need to submit is a proof of acceptance. And here you can think about this in 2 different ways, right? If you already have the acceptance, you submit that. If you submit it but haven't heard back, you submit information about when you would hear about that acceptance, right? So maybe there's a November conference, right? So a lot of students are applying for GURC, for the Georgia Undergraduate Research Conference, and they haven't heard, of course, yet whether they were accepted. So you can say, hey, I haven't heard yet, but I expect that I will learn about acceptance by this date. And then the last thing, and this is an important thing, you're going to have to submit a student travel authorization form. And that student travel authorization form has to be in hard copy, signed in ink, right? It cannot be like an electronic version, right? And so you can take that signed form to either offices in Gainesville or Dahlonega, or mail them if you're at a campus where you don't have a CURCA office or a nationally competitive scholarship office. The student travel authorization is going to be a standard form that is available on the UNG website, where there's a copy here you can see on the screen. You're going to enter some basic information about you, right? Your name, your 900 number, your travel dates, where you're going, and then you're going to provide a detailed account of the cost estimate, right? How much do you estimate you're going to be spending on lodging, on transportation, meals, on registration fees, on other, and what's the total cost going to be, right? And if there's an other item there, make sure that you explain it in that space underneath it. And then in that big box in the middle, you describe what the trip is for, right? Oh, I'm going to present at the Georgia Sociological Association annual meeting in Callaway Gardens or whatever. And then there's a bunch of stuff at the bottom there, but most of it you don't enter, right? The stuff that you would enter is your student signature and a signature of your faculty mentor, right? The professor that you worked with. And so once this form is filled out, you need to submit those to the CURCA office by Friday, September 16th. In the Dahlonega office, if you're in Dahlonega, it's at the Dunlap 108A. If you are in the Gainesville campus, it's on the administration building, office 111. If you are in another campus other than these 2, make sure that you submit it the night before or the day before through inter-campus mail so that we can get them on time, right? If you're going to receive funding from more than one source, right? In other words, maybe you're a department, maybe you're a scholarship, maybe you are part of a student group that's going to pitch in a little bit, you're going to have to get one of them to sign that form as well, right? If the form is complicated, if the form is tricky, you can reach out to us and we'll work with you to make sure that you are on the same page as we are. I've been mentioning a rubric, and so what I want to do for a little bit here is talk about the rubric that we have, right? So what's going to happen is that you're going to submit your proposals to us. We're going to take those proposals and we're going to give it to our reviewers to evaluate. And we are going to give this rubric to our reviewers to evaluate proposals, right? And so if you look at this rubric, it will give you the 5 categories that we're going to be using to evaluate the submissions that we get, right? One is going to be in the impact of presentation, right? Is this a national conference? Is it a regional conference? Is it a small local conference, right? The bigger the venue, the bigger the impact. 2 is going to be your student participation. Are you the lead presenter? Are you one of the many presenters? Are you a secondary presenter? Are you not even discussing what your role is? That's another thing that we're going to be evaluating you on. 3 is going to be the type of conference. Are you going to be presenting at a regular session, main session during the conference? Is it going to be a poster session? Is it going to be like an undergraduate symposium at a professional conference, or is it going to be like an undergraduate conference? 4, and this is the biggest item by far, and that's why I spent a little bit of time when we were discussing the cover letter, discussing this, is what role does this play on your academic or professional development? And this here is going to be worth twice as many points as each other section, right? So being able to explain very carefully how the presentation, the conference travel that you're going to be participating in is going to enhance your career goals is going to be a very important part of getting this funding. And then, of course, the last item there is budget. And having a detailed budget is good. Having a detailed budget with evidence is better. On the budget, include everything in the budget, even if they go over $500, right? So just because it's in the budget doesn't mean that we'll be able to fund it, but we do want to see the whole thing there, right? So all the different costs should be there. With regards to meeting registration, we can refund registration, but not membership, right? So if you have to join a particular association and then pay a registration fee, we can only cover the registration fee, not the membership. If they're both tied together, right? If it's registration and membership, then we can cover it. In terms of lodgings, keep in mind that Airbnb is not reimbursable by UNG, right? We do want to see kind of like a formal receipt from a hotel of some form, right? We don't want to be like, oh, I stayed at my aunt's house and she charged me $50. Doesn't matter if it's through our Airbnb or not. For meals, we're not going to look at the actual price of meals. We're going to look at what we would consider to be per diem rates. There's going to be a link so that you can find the per diem rates for the particular city that you're going to be traveling to, and that's going to determine what you enter for per diem. And then transportation, and here we want to see, are you driving? If so, include mileage. If you're sharing it, make sure that you mention that. If you're renting a car, make sure that you mention that. If you're going to be like, oh, I'm going to fly out of the Atlanta International Airport and I'm going to have to need to park my car there, make sure that you enter those, right? And then, of course, you have a total and a summary at the end. So again, it's important to add everything, even if it goes beyond $500. And if you are in that situation where you have to decide whether you want to overestimate or underestimate, it's always better to overestimate the costs than to underestimate the costs, right? If you tell us that you're going to have to spend $400 on lodging and it comes out to be 200, that's great. But if you tell us that you're going to spend $200 on lodging and suddenly then it comes out at 500, then we might have to look into things, right? The per diem part is going to be determined not by UNG, but by the U.S. General Services Administration. They're going to have a website that we have linked, and when you find that website, you're going to find the particular city that you're going to be traveling to, and there will be a tab where you're going to find the meals and incidentals breakdown, where they're going to tell you what the per diem for that city for meals and incidentals is. Keep in mind that the per diem for first and last day of travel is going to be different than for the middle of the trip, right? So you use that to get all this sort of stuff into the proposal. So I'm going to turn it over to Allison because she's the one who's going to be talking to you a lot about budget issues. You're going to work with her closely to make sure that your budget is taken care of, and to make sure that you submit the paperwork correctly to get your reimbursement. So Allison, I'm turning it over to you. Let me know whenever you want to skip to the next slide.
Thank you, Dr. Pinheiro. My name is Allison. Like you introduced me, you'd be working with me if you won a travel grant or any kind of grant from our office. So I just wanted to go over these next few slides. If you do win the grant, kind of what your next steps or things to keep in mind. So the reimbursing process is as smooth as possible. So if you do win the CURCA Travel Grant, you'll receive an email with us with an award and some of the similar information. But just to go over it, go ahead and reach out to me if you have any questions about the reimbursing process. Usually I try to help you prepare documentation before you travel. Usually you don't need it right away, especially if your travel is in a couple months, but feel free to reach out to us, either my personal email or the curca@ung.edu email. So I can help clarify any kind of details in terms of the reimbursing procedure and what you need. Also, one thing I want to say is if you do win, please keep all your receipts. You don't need to keep your receipts for food. As Dr. Pinheiro explained, you'll get a rate per day, but anything from a hotel or even gas if you rented a car, please keep those receipts so that way when we come to reimbursing and filling out that paperwork, it'll be as smooth as possible and we'll have the proper documentation. And even for things like parking, sometimes if you don't have a receipt, having a screenshot, if it's done through an app, would be considered a receipt. So make sure you keep any of that, especially any Uber or Lyft receipt. For hotels, for lodging, we need to have a receipt that shows a zero balance after you have checked out to be reimbursed. So a lot of these times, I think this is called a folio, and it's something you can ask when you check out the hotel to ask for a folio. So it'll show your credit card, your name, how long you stayed, and taxes, and a zero balance. So that's very important. And then lastly, to save money, if you are going with a group or several of your other friends or colleagues, are going to a hotel, ask around if you can share a room or if you can carpool, and that way that'll help save you money and maximize the amount of the grant. Go to the next slide. So overall, you'll be reimbursed after the conference in most cases. The sooner you process paperwork, the sooner you'll get reimbursed. Again, email us at curca@ung.edu. You can email it either before or within 2 weeks of your presentation. So that way I can send you the reimbursement paperwork. I'll also send you instructions on how to fill out the reimbursement paperwork. But overall, we like to reimburse you within 2 weeks of the conference. We will send you, and you need to fill out either an in-state or out-of-state reimbursement form. And once this is all filled out, it's signed in ink. A student vendor form, again, signed in ink. We also need a copy of the conference program that lists the schedule of the conference and where it lists your name and presentation and any original receipts like for lodging and mileage screenshots that you'll claim on the reimbursement form. And the instructions will walk you through, and as always, you can always reach out to us or even set up a meeting with me to do the paperwork all together after the conference. So yeah, and then you just email us, and you can also send all this if you want to work on it yourself after I send you the paperwork. You can send me a copy before you sign everything so I can look over everything and make sure all the per diems and the receipts are there before we sign and you submit the physical copies to me. And lastly, we have a few travel grant frequently asked questions that we get asked a lot that I just wanted to go over. So the first one is, can I apply for conference travel grant if I already graduated? No, these grants are for undergraduates only. There's usually a separate pool of money for graduate students. So I'd reach out to graduate studies if you are a graduate student. Another question we get a lot is, can seniors apply for a travel grant? The answer is yes. The only issue is the presentation and travel has to occur before you graduate. So if you graduate on December 14th, for example, but the conference is on December 20th, well, the conference will happen after you graduate. You're no longer an undergraduate, so we cannot, unfortunately, cover the cost of that. So keep that in mind if you are graduating in, especially in this winter and everything, to look at the dates of the conference. Another one we get asked quite frequently is, do I automatically get $500 if I win? No, you can get up to $500. Some people don't need the full amount of the grant, and that'll show on your student travel authorization form. Some people just need maybe registration, maybe one night of lodging, and mileage, and it might not be that much. So you can go up to 500, but that will be determined, and it'll be listed on your award letter that we'll send you if you do win the grant. Should I estimate on the lower end of my costs? And Dr. Pinheiro explained this already. No, please estimate the accurate amount as possible so you know how much it will cost, and we know also as well. Will requesting above 500 disqualify me? Again, nope. We want you to be as accurate as possible and do your research. And then another one is, how do I know if my conference is local, state, regional, or national? So you should talk to your faculty advisor or mentor if the conference obligation of the conference obligation prior to applying, to clarify the level of conference. So they should know. And usually the information can be found on the conference website as well. What if I haven't been accepted yet to my conference? Again, that's perfectly fine. If you haven't been accepted yet, you can just upload a Word document or PDF stating when you're expecting to be accepted. And then finally, can I submit more than one application for conference travel grants? Yes. If you have two conferences that you are trying to apply to in this cycle that are happening before or by January 31st, I would just submit two separate applications. And then again, you'd also have two separate cover letters with two separate budgets as well. Next. So lastly, in review, applying for a travel grant, apply on the info ready site, and you can access that through our CURCA website. Have ready to upload your completed cover letter, your submitted abstract, or your artistic submission or letter describing the application process, proof of acceptance or your projected date of notification, and a copy of the student travel authorization form. So the original has to be turned into us. You can scan the copy that's been signed and upload that to your application, and then turn the original to us to either Dunlap 108 in Dahlonega or Administration 111 in Gainesville, or you can mail it to us. And if you have any questions whatsoever, you can email us at curca@ung.edu.
And just one quick clarification, that January 28th there, that's wrong. For this cycle, it's September 16th.
Yes,
right.
So I forgot to do that. Apologies.
Yeah, no, it's all good. I just didn't want to make anybody sort of confused. So does anybody have any questions? I'll take that as no questions then. So just to wrap this up then, remember this fall cycle is for travel that happens before January 31st, right? If you have a conference after January 31st, then it's the spring cycle where the deadline is going to be January 27th, right? So if you have a conference between now and January 31st that you're trying to attend, use this cycle. If it's a spring conference, use next cycle, okay? So thank you all for coming, and feel free to reach out to any of us if you have any questions, if you have any concerns, if you're like, oh my God, I don't know what to put here. I'm confused about that part. You know, we answer all sorts of questions, and, you know, we'll work closely with you to make sure that the paperwork part is the easy part of the process. Okay, so thank you all, and have a nice day.